My husband said it was just another business trip, a chance for us to finally get the stability we'd always dreamed of. He kissed me, promised to call as soon as he landed, and walked out the door wearing the cologne I had given him as a gift. But at 2 a.m, my phone rang. It wasn't Mark. It was a woman's voice, desperate, coming from a hospital miles away from where he was supposed to be. "Are you his wife?" she asked between sobs. "There's been an accident, and his fiancé isn't waking up." In that moment, my world stopped. My husband wasn't in a meeting. He was at a luxury resort, with an engagement ring in his pocket that was never meant for me. And what I discovered during that call changed absolutely everything. If this story speaks to you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. New stories like this one drop every week and you don't want to miss them. The suitcase was already open on the bed when I walked into our bedroom that Tuesday evening. Mark was moving around the room with an energy I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. He was pulling shirts from hangers, folding them with unusual precision, humming something under his breath like a man who had just won the lottery. "Babe, I just got the call," he said without looking at me. "Chicago, the Henderson contract. If I close this deal, we're talking a serious bonus, enough for the down payment on the house we looked at in April." The house in April. He knew exactly which buttons to push. I leaned against the doorframe and watched him. Something about the scene felt rehearsed, like he had practiced this moment in his head before performing it for me. The enthusiasm was too polished, the explanation too clean. "When do you leave?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning. Early flight." He finally looked at me and smiled. That wide, confident smile that had made me fall in love with him 7 years ago. "It's only 4 days, Claire. I'll be back before you even miss me." "I already miss you," I thought. "I've been missing you for months." I sat on the edge of the bed and watched him pack. That's when I noticed it. The cologne. The dark blue bottle sitting on top of his folded clothes, carefully placed so it wouldn't spill. Noir de Noir. The bottle I had given him for his birthday last year. The one he claimed gave him headaches. The one that had been sitting untouched in the bathroom cabinet since February. "I thought you didn't like that one," I said, keeping my voice neutral. He didn't miss a beat. "It's growing on me. Besides, clients notice these things. First impressions, you know. First impressions." "Right." I nodded and said nothing, but my stomach had already begun to tighten. That slow, nauseating twist that a woman's body performs when her mind is still refusing to accept what her instincts already know. His phone buzzed twice on the nightstand. He crossed the room faster than necessary, flipped it face down, and slid it into his pocket in one fluid motion. He didn't look at me when he did it. We had dinner in near silence. He talked about the contract, the client, the Chicago skyline. I pushed pasta around my plate and listened to the words without hearing them. My eyes kept drifting to the shape of the phone in his pocket, a small, hard rectangle that seemed to pulse like a second heartbeat. The next morning he kissed me on the forehead, not on the lips, not a real kiss, a goodbye that felt more like a receipt, something transactional, something you give someone just to say the exchange is complete. "I'll call you when I land," he said. The door closed behind him, and the silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The house had never felt so large. I stood in the hallway for a long moment after the door closed, staring at the space where Mark had just been. His absence had a shape to it, a specific hollow that pressed against my chest and made it hard to breathe. I told myself I was being ridiculous. 4 days. It was only 4 days. I made coffee I didn't drink. I folded laundry I had already folded the day before. I turned the television on, let it fill the rooms with noise, and didn't watch a single second of it. By noon, I had reorganized the kitchen pantry twice and scrubbed the bathroom tiles with the kind of intensity that only comes from a mind that desperately needs to be anywhere but inside itself. At 2 p.m, I called him. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. His voice, calm, professional, rehearsed, asked me to leave a message. I didn't. At 4, I tried again. Same result. At 6, a message arrived. 3 sentences. No punctuation at the end of the last one. Meetings back to back. Signal is terrible in this building. Talk tomorrow. I read it 3 times. I typed and deleted 4 different responses before settling on a simple heart emoji. He didn't react to it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my side of the bed, our bed, though it had started to feel more like my bed in recent months, and stared at the ceiling. The sheets still carried a faint trace of his scent. Not Noir de Noir, his real scent, the one underneath all the performance. It was somewhere around midnight when I got up to get a glass of water. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe exhaustion lowers your defenses. Maybe instinct moves faster than logic in the dark. But I found myself standing in front of his dresser, opening the top drawer, the one he always said was just for socks and junk. I almost closed it without looking. But something caught my eye. A small glint of gold buried beneath a folded pair of gray socks. I reached in slowly, the way you reach for something when part of you already knows you don't want to find it. 2 earrings, small gold hoops with a tiny pearl at the center. Delicate, feminine, expensive, not mine. I held them in my palm and felt the temperature of the room drop 10 degrees. My hands weren't shaking. Not yet. I was in that strange, suspended state that comes just before devastation, when your body hasn't yet decided how to fall apart. I set the earrings carefully on top of the dresser. I went back to bed. I didn't sleep, and by morning, I had made a decision. I was done waiting for the truth to come to me. I was going to find it myself. I didn't cry. Not once. I think that surprised me more than anything else. I had always imagined that if I ever found myself in a moment like this, sitting at the kitchen table at 6 a.m. with a pair of someone else's earrings in front of me, I would fall apart completely. Ugly crying, hyperventilating. The whole performance of a woman whose world had just cracked open. But there were no tears. Just a cold, quiet clarity that settled over me like fog. I opened my laptop. The first thing I checked was our joint bank account. Mark and I had always shared finances. His idea, actually, back when we got married. Transparency, he had called it. No secrets between us. I almost laughed out loud at that memory as I scrolled through the recent transactions. The charges told a story he hadn't bothered to hide carefully enough. 3 days ago, a reservation confirmation charge of $42 from a place called the Meridian Resort and Spa. I recognized the city immediately, the same one where the Henderson contract was supposedly waiting to be signed. But Mark had told me he was staying at a Marriott near the convention center. I had the name written on a sticky note on the refrigerator door. The Meridian was not a Marriott. I searched the resort online. The website loaded slowly, filling my screen with photographs of infinity pools, candle-lit dinners, and couples walking barefoot along a private beach at sunset. The homepage banner read, "Where love becomes a memory." My stomach turned. I dug deeper. The reservation charge was for a couple's deluxe suite, 2 nights, with a 3rd night added as an extension, booked just 48 hours before departure. There was also a charge from a jewelry store 2 weeks prior, $460. I had seen that transaction at the time and asked Mark about it. He told me it was a gift for his mother's birthday. His mother's birthday was in March. It was currently November. I sat back in my chair and pressed my fingers against my temples. The kitchen was completely silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's car pulling out of a driveway. Normal sounds. Ordinary Wednesday morning sounds. The kind of sounds that have no idea your life is unraveling in real time. I pulled up his travel itinerary from an email he had forwarded me. Just in case of emergency, he had said. The flight was real. The departure time was real, but the hotel listed was the Marriott, not the Meridian. He had created 2 separate realities and handed me the wrong one. I closed the laptop slowly. He hadn't traveled alone. The suite, the jewelry, the extended stay, none of it was the language of a business trip. It was the language of a man planning something, and I was going to find out exactly what. I had just turned off the bedside lamp when my phone lit up the ceiling. 11:47 p.m. An unknown number. Area code I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to ignore it. Spam calls at midnight weren't unusual, and I was exhausted in the specific way that comes not from physical tiredness, but from spending an entire day holding yourself together with nothing but willpower and cold coffee. I watched the screen glow for 2 full rings, then something made me answer. Hello? The silence on the other end lasted just long enough to make me pull the phone away from my ear and check that the call was still connected. Then I heard it, a breath, unsteady, the kind that comes after crying for a long time. Are you Mark's wife? The voice was young, soft, completely shattered. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Yes, I said. The word came out steadier than I felt. Who is this? My name is Dana. A pause, another fractured breath. I'm calling because there's been an accident at the Meridian Resort. She said the name like she assumed I already knew it, like it was a place I should have known about all along. Mark was hurt. He's in surgery right now at St. Vincent's Medical Center. It's serious." The room tilted. I sat up slowly, my feet finding the cold floor, my free hand pressing flat against the mattress, as if I needed something solid to confirm I was still in the physical world. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. "How bad?" I managed. "The doctors said there may be spinal involvement." Her voice cracked on the last word. "They're not sure yet. I thought you should know. I thought someone should call you." I should have asked how she got my number. I should have asked a dozen practical questions. Instead, I asked the one that had been burning a hole in my chest since I found those earrings 2 nights ago. "Who are you to him, Dana?" The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. She stopped, started again. "I'm his fiancé's sister." The word fiancé hit me like a physical impact, a sharp, airless blow to the center of my chest. I pressed my hand against my sternum without thinking, as if I could hold myself together from the outside. "His fiancé," I repeated slowly. "Sarah." Dana's voice dropped to almost nothing. "She was with him when it happened. She's unconscious. They won't tell us much because we're not family." A bitter, hollow laugh escaped her. "Apparently you are." I was already out of bed, already reaching for my keys. The drive to St. Vincent's took 40 minutes. They were the longest 40 minutes of my life. The emergency room at St. Vincent's smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, and the particular kind of dread that soaks into walls when too many people have sat in plastic chairs waiting for news that might destroy them. I pushed through the glass doors at 1:23 a.m. The fluorescent lights were merciless. Everything was too bright, too loud, too sharp. The squeak of rubber soles on linoleum, the low murmur of a television mounted in the corner, the mechanical beeping filtering through from somewhere deeper in the building. I stood at the entrance for just a moment, letting my eyes adjust, letting my resolve harden. Then I saw her. She was sitting in the far corner of the waiting area, her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. She was younger than I expected, mid-20s maybe, dark hair, pretty in the uncomplicated way of someone who has never had to work very hard at it. She was wearing Mark's jacket. I recognized it immediately. The navy blue Patagonia he had owned for 3 years, the one with the small coffee stain on the left sleeve that he never bothered to have cleaned. She had it pulled tight around her shoulders, her fingers gripping the lapels like a life vest. Something about that jacket made my jaw tighten in a way that no amount of composure could fully hide. I walked toward her. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and I watched her face cycle through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, fear. Her eyes were red and swollen. A crumpled tissue was twisted between her fingers. "You must be Claire," she whispered, "and you must be Sarah." She flinched at my tone. I hadn't meant it to be cruel. It simply came out stripped of everything soft. I sat down 2 chairs away from her, not beside her, not across the room. 2 chairs, close enough to talk, far enough to think. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The television in the corner was showing a weather forecast for a city neither of us lived in. A nurse walked past without looking at us. "He told me you were divorced," Sarah finally said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the words landed like stones dropped into still water. "He said the papers were finalized over a year ago, that you had both moved on." She looked at her hands. "He showed me an apartment. He said it was his place. He took me to meet his friends. Her voice broke. "He asked me to marry him last weekend, at dinner. He got down on one knee." I looked at her face, really looked at it. She wasn't the enemy. She was another victim wearing my husband's jacket, and somehow, that made everything so much worse. The waiting room emptied slowly around us. A family in the corner was called through the double doors by a tired-looking nurse. An elderly man folded his newspaper and shuffled toward the vending machine. One by one, the witnesses disappeared until it was just Sarah and me, sitting under the merciless fluorescent lights, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and cold coffee, and 7 years of lies I was only beginning to fully count. "Tell me everything," I said. It wasn't a request. Sarah looked at me for a moment, then nodded. She unfolded herself from the chair slowly, like someone who had been bracing for impact for so long that relaxing felt dangerous. She pulled Mark's jacket tighter around her shoulders. I had decided to stop noticing that, and began to talk. They had met 14 months ago, a conference in Denver. Mark had approached her at the hotel bar, charming and self-assured, and told her within the first 20 minutes that he was separated from his wife. Amicably, he had emphasized. No drama, no bitterness, just two people who had grown apart. He had shown her a photo of the apartment he claimed was his, a sleek, modern place downtown that I now realized must have been pulled from a real estate listing. The relationship had moved quickly. Weekend trips, long phone calls late at night. Late at night, I noted, filing that detail into the growing archive of things that now made terrible sense. He had introduced her to a carefully curated selection of his friends, people who either didn't know me well or had agreed, consciously or not, to play along. He had told her his name at work was simply Mark Bennett, dropping the hyphenated version of our shared last name that he used on all our joint accounts. He had constructed an entirely separate life, with its own geography, its own cast of characters, its own history. And then came the savings. Sarah hesitated before this part. Her fingers twisted the tissue in her lap into a tight spiral. He told me he had been putting money aside, she said quietly, for our future. He said he wanted us to have a real start. A house, not an apartment. He showed me a balance, $43,000. She looked up at me. He said it was his bonus money, that he had been saving for 2 years. The number hit me like cold water. $43,000. The exact amount that had been growing in our joint savings account. The down payment fund. The account we had started together when we first talked about buying a home. The dream he had dangled in front of me just 2 mornings ago, as he packed his suitcase with another woman's perfume preferences in mind. I sat very still. That money, I said carefully, was ours. Both of ours. Sarah closed her eyes, and in that silence, the full architecture of his deception finally stood completely visible. The doctor found us just after 3 a.m. He was a compact man with tired eyes and the practiced calm of someone who delivered difficult news for a living. He told us that Mark was out of surgery, that the spinal concern had been ruled out, that he was stable, sedated, and would likely regain full consciousness within the next few hours. He told us Sarah could see him briefly, as she had been listed as an emergency contact. I watched the doctor's face carefully when I introduced myself as Mark's wife. The flicker of discomfort that crossed his expression told me everything I needed to know about what name had been written on those intake forms. "I'll be going in," I said. It was not a question. The room was dim and smelled of plastic tubing and the sterile, impersonal warmth of machines doing the work that bodies temporarily couldn't. Mark looked smaller in the hospital bed than he ever had in real life. The confidence that usually occupied him like a second skeleton, that broad-shouldered, easy-smiling assurance, was entirely absent. He was just a man with a bandaged shoulder, an IV in his left arm, and a bruise darkening along his jawline. Sarah stood on one side of the bed. I stood on the other. We were both there when his eyes opened. He blinked at the ceiling first, then his gaze drifted left and found Sarah. Something soft and relieved moved across his face, and then his eyes traveled across the bed and found me. I have replayed that moment many times since. The way the relief drained out of him in real time, replaced by something I can only describe as the specific panic of a man watching 2 separate worlds collide at a speed he cannot stop. His mouth opened. "Claire, don't," I said quietly. He closed his mouth. I reached into my bag and removed the folder I had prepared before leaving the house. Bank statements, the Meridian reservation, the jewelry store receipt, screenshots of the savings account balance with the withdrawal history highlighted in yellow. I placed them one by one on the bed beside him, smoothing each page flat with deliberate calm, the way you might arrange documents for a business presentation. He looked at the papers, then at me, then at Sarah. "I can explain. You've been explaining things to both of us for over a year," I said. "I think we've heard enough explanations." Sarah said nothing. She simply removed his jacket from her shoulders, folded it with quiet precision, and placed it at the foot of the hospital bed. Then she picked up her bag, looked at Mark for a long moment with an expression I recognized, the hollow, recalibrating look of a woman realizing she has been living inside someone else's fiction, and walked out of the room without a word. The door swung shut behind her. Mark turned to me, and for the first time in our marriage, he had absolutely nothing to say. The room felt smaller with just the 2 of us in it. Mark's eyes tracked me as I pulled the chair from the corner and sat down beside his bed, not close enough to touch, not far enough to suggest I was afraid of him. I crossed my legs, folded my hands in my lap, and looked at him with the kind of stillness that I think frightened him more than any argument could have. He tried twice to speak, before any words actually came out. "Claire, please, just let me..." "I'm going to talk," I said, "and you're going to listen. Can you do that?" He swallowed, nodded. I took a slow breath. "While you were in surgery," I began, "I made some calls." I watched his face carefully as I spoke. There is a specific kind of satisfaction, not joyful, not cruel, but deeply, quietly necessary, in watching someone realize that the window for damage control has already closed. The first call had been to David Harmon, Mark's boss, also my father's college roommate, a fact Mark had always treated as a charming coincidence, rather than the structural vulnerability it actually was. I had sent David a concise email at 2:15 a.m. No dramatics, no emotional language, just a timeline and the supporting documents attached. The Meridian reservation, the savings account withdrawals, the jewelry receipt. The confirmation that Mark had not been at any client meeting because the Henderson account, as David had confirmed in a reply I received before entering this room, did not exist. Mark's face went gray. "David wrote back within 20 minutes, I said. "He's thorough that way." The second call had been to our family attorney, Patricia Wells. Patricia had been handling my family's legal matters since before I was born, and when I called her at midnight, she answered on the third ring without complaint. By the time I arrived at the hospital, she had already begun drafting the initial separation paperwork and had placed a hold on the joint savings account pending the divorce proceedings. $43,000, frozen, inaccessible to either of us until the courts decided what was fair. "You'll want to get your own lawyer," I told him. Patricia suggested someone, actually. She said he's very good, very expensive. Mark opened his mouth. I raised one finger. "I'm not finished." The third thing I had done required no phone call at all. Before leaving our house in the early hours of the morning, I had moved through our bedroom with a single suitcase and the focused efficiency of someone who had been mentally packing for longer than she realized. My documents. My jewelry. The real pieces, the ones with actual value. The external hard drive with our shared photos, our tax records. 7 years of the administrative architecture of a shared life. I had also taken the blue folder from the filing cabinet, the one containing my name on every important document, every insurance policy, every property record. I left his golf clubs, his collection of business books arranged by height on the office shelf, the coffee maker he had insisted on buying that I had never liked. I left the sticky note on the refrigerator with the Marriott's name on it. I thought that was a nice touch. "The house keys are on the kitchen counter," I said. "I've already spoken to the landlord. The lease renewal comes up in 6 weeks. That will be entirely your problem." Mark stared at the ceiling. A monitor beside him beeped with steady indifference. "It was a mistake," he said finally. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual polish. "Claire, I know how this looks, but it started as something small and I didn't know how to stop it and A mistake," I repeated slowly, "is forgetting to buy milk. A mistake is sending an email to the wrong person." I leaned forward slightly. "You booked a couple's suite. You bought an engagement ring. You moved $43,000 toward a future with another woman while looking me in the eye every single morning." I paused. "That is not a mistake, Mark. That is a schedule." He had no answer for that. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, picked up my bag. "I hope the surgery went well," I said. "I genuinely mean that. I don't want anything bad to happen to you." I looked at him one final time. This man I had loved, this stranger wearing his face. "I just don't want anything to do with you either." I walked out of the room. The hallway was quiet and long, and lit with the pale, honest light of early morning. I didn't look back. Autumn arrived the way it always does in this part of the country. Gradually, then all at once. One morning the trees were green, and the next they were burning orange and gold, shedding leaves onto sidewalks with a quiet indifference to everything happening beneath them. I noticed it for the first time in years. I think when you are inside a bad marriage, you stop seeing seasons. You stop seeing a lot of things. The divorce took 4 months. Patricia was efficient, methodical, and completely without sentiment, which was exactly what I needed. The joint savings account was divided according to documented contribution, which, thanks to 7 years of meticulous financial records I had always maintained, worked substantially in my favor. Mark contested 2 items. Patricia disposed of both objections with the brisk energy of someone swatting flies. He had hired the expensive lawyer she recommended. I suspected he regretted that almost immediately. The professional consequences arrived before the legal ones. David Harmon had been thorough, as promised. An internal review was completed within 2 weeks of my email. The Henderson account, the fabricated travel, the pattern of unexplained absences logged against client meeting hours. It built a picture that the company's HR department found impossible to overlook. Mark was placed on suspension the same week he was discharged from the hospital. His termination letter arrived 3 weeks after that. I heard this from mutual friends, the kind who had always been more mine than ours. I didn't feel triumphant about it. I want to be honest about that. There was no celebration, no satisfied smile in the mirror. What I felt was something quieter and more complicated. The specific exhaustion of watching someone dismantle their own life with their own hands, and knowing that your only real role in the demolition was refusing to look away. Sarah, from what Dana told me in a brief message 6 weeks after the hospital, had returned to her family in Portland. She had left the city, left the job she had taken partly to be closer to Mark, left the apartment she had moved into 18 months ago, when he had painted a careful picture of a future that was never going to exist. Dana said her sister was angry. Dana said her sister was going to be okay. I believed both things. Mark called me twice during the divorce proceedings. Patricia had advised against any direct contact, so I let both calls go to voicemail. The first message was long, rambling and defensive in equal measure, cycling through justifications I had already heard in the hospital room and a few new ones he had apparently developed during his recovery. The second message was shorter. His voice was different in it, quieter, less rehearsed. "I know there's nothing I can say," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, really sorry, not for getting caught, for doing it at all." I listened to that message 3 times. Then I deleted it. By December, Mark was living in a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city. A small, featureless place, nothing like the sleek downtown fantasy he had constructed for Sarah. A mutual friend mentioned it in passing, clearly uncertain whether I wanted the information. I thanked her and changed the subject. I thought about him sometimes, not with longing, not even with anger, which surprised me more than anything else. Mostly I thought about him the way you think about a storm that has passed, aware of the damage it left, grateful for the stillness that came after. The stillness, it turned out, was the part I hadn't known I was desperately missing. And now, finally, it was entirely mine. Spring came slowly that year, the way the best things usually do. It started with small signs, a crocus pushing through the frozen ground outside my kitchen window, the days stretching just a few minutes longer each week, the particular quality of morning light that arrives in late March and makes everything look like it has been quietly washed clean overnight. I noticed all of it. I had made a deliberate decision to notice things again. I had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the west side of the city in January. The second bedroom was technically a guest room, but I had turned it into an office, a real one, with a proper desk and good lighting and shelves I had assembled myself on a Saturday afternoon with a glass of wine, and a level that I used incorrectly at least 4 times before getting it right. It was the first space that had ever been entirely, uncomplicatedly mine. I repainted the living room walls a deep, warm terracotta that my mother said was too bold and that I loved unreservedly. I got a cat. His name is August. He has strong opinions about where he sits and absolutely no interest in my emotional needs, which I find deeply restful. The work helped too. I had spent the last 2 years of my marriage quietly shrinking my professional ambitions to fit around the shape of a life that, it turned out, had never been quite what I thought it was. In February, I accepted a senior position at a firm I had turned down 18 months earlier. Turned down because Mark had said the commute would be inconvenient. The commute was 40 minutes by train. I bought a good pair of headphones and started listening to audiobooks. I won't pretend that healing moved in a straight line. There were nights, fewer as the months passed, but real, when I would lie awake in my terracotta-walled bedroom and feel the full weight of what had happened. Not just the betrayal itself, but the accumulated loss of all the ordinary things that surround a shared life, the inside jokes that now belonged to no one, the future we had planned in careful detail that turned out to be a map to a place that didn't exist, the version of myself that had trusted completely and had not yet learned what that trust was worth. On those nights, I let myself feel it, all of it, without rushing toward the exit. Grief, I have learned, is not a problem to be solved. It is a distance to be walked. I walked it. By April, something had shifted in a way I couldn't precisely name, but could absolutely feel. A new solidity beneath my feet, a quietness in my chest that was no longer the silence of suppression, but the silence of actual peace. I started running in the mornings. I called my sister more. I had dinner with friends I had allowed to drift during the years when keeping my marriage presentable had taken up so much invisible energy. I looked in the mirror one morning in late April, just an ordinary Tuesday, nothing significant about it, and recognized the woman looking back at me. I hadn't seen her in a long time. Mark, from what I understand, is still in that small apartment on the east side, still navigating the wreckage of the choices he made with such careful, deliberate precision. I don't follow his life. I don't need to. Some people spend years waiting for the person who hurt them to suffer adequately. I understand that impulse completely, but I found something that worked better for me. I decided to be happy instead. Not as a performance, not as revenge, just as a quiet, daily, deeply personal act of reclaiming the life that had always been mine to live. The door he closed when he walked out that Tuesday morning, I painted it terracotta too. A thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. It truly means the world to me. What would you have done in Claire's place? Would you have confronted Mark at the hospital, or walked away in silence and let the consequences speak for themselves? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you have a story you'd like to see told on this channel, something you lived through, witnessed, or simply can't stop thinking about, drop it in the comments. Your story might be the next one. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps more than you know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join this community today. Every week we bring you a new story about real emotions, real consequences, and real strength. Thank you for being here. Until next time, take care of yourself, because you deserve nothing less.